please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome back to a Megon 2 Electric Boogaloo. Today we're going to be responding to two videos that definitively prove how it is god-awful being American, what is wrong with America, and why you Americans should just surrender to the crown, the French, there's a little irony for you, and take half the day off and surrender to the Spanish. Let us recolonize and give you the Electric Boogaloo you so greatly deserve. A reset, yes, how about that? But we'll abolish all the bad things that you did wrong in the however many years your cute little empire existed. These two videos should adequately convey this message. I wonder if anyone took that so literally they disliked the video. Let's start with America. Flags.
Things I hate about America after spending lots of time overseas, part 1.
I'm going to guess a few of them, having not seen your video yet. Food quality, air quality, the people, the culture, the politics, the Americanness, and the guns. Am I close? I feel like I'm close. I would add hobbies, but we all know your hobbies are essentially Command and Conquer IRL, and to breed at an alarming rate to try and keep up with other nations that breed at an alarming rate.
This one might piss people off, but the patriotism.
So I guessed that one correctly. That's good. Americanness, I believe I called it. For the sake of it, I actually think it's one of your most endearing qualities as a country, to be so fundamentally proud of who you are. Because you embrace the mistakes you've made and you learn from them. That is something many countries don't do. They guilt themselves for generations. No offense to Germany, but they're a great example of it, who have guilted themselves for over a century now. Many countries are not far behind, in fact. Some are so ashamed that they would rather erase their own national identity in favor of appearing multicultural, which in turn will just erase their identity and replace it with other conflicting identities, which then would lead to more infighting, as opposed to what others think it does, and that's lead to cultural enrichment. America is a bit of an exception to this, which is quite surprising. Again, why I find it quite an endearing quality.
A flag on every single street is just simply unnecessary.
Why? I am genuinely curious why that is the case. When I hear that American flags in many different states, including those that are more blue than red, many flags are seen everywhere. What is wrong with that? In the United Kingdom, England especially, you don't see many English flags in England. The reason why is because they too suffer from a form of guilt for their own past mistakes. I take issue with this because I'm very proud of being English. It is a part of my identity, a part of my culture. And in before someone says, "You don't have any," sure, go nuts, say that, I don't care. The point is, I'm proud of that identity. I have nothing to be ashamed of, nor my country's history. There is no country on this planet that can truly tell me they're not ashamed of their past. If someone wants to insert slavery, I would like to boing whip that, because most countries have had a form of slavery and many still do. And obviously there's modern slavery, which is a different kind.
American flag hats, the American apparel, it's everything. You know what I'm talking about. We push this American agenda on everyone who lives here so hard.
We in the United Kingdom do something similar in our main cities with touristy paraphernalia, all covered in Union Jacks. But what's amazing about your country is you have a number of holidays that celebrate what it means to be American. I don't see how that is inherently a negative thing to be reminded of who you are. Your national anthem speaks for itself in that regard. To be proud of what you are is quite important. Now, of course, if you don't share those beliefs, I fully understand that. But I do find it quite fascinating how this bothers you so much, when in reality, I think most of us can agree the only reason you've made this video is because you look down on what it means to be American. Either because you've guilted yourself into believing that this is something to be ashamed of, or you're looking at it and just like, I'm contrarian, this is cringe. Get rid of it.
And when we go to other countries, it's just not pushed that hard. When you go other countries, they rep their country without being literally annoying about it.
You'll find it's less about being annoying about it, and more because Americans are often seen as more extroverted with their national pride, as opposed to other nations that are much older that are more introverted about their pride towards their nation. England's a great example. It may as well just have on its flag INTJ on it. If you know what that means, well done. You're one of us. I know you might be American as well, and you'll say, but I'm American and I'm not like that. Thank you. But a vast swath of your country are, as opposed to a vast swath of my country that is not. and many others in fact. Again, you're quite a young nation. I don't think either, because of how your country currently runs, it is likely that that kind of patriotism, pride in one's nationality, is going to go anywhere anytime soon. Especially because you have a constitution that is so enshrined in your culture, fundamental to the fabric of America. It's quite something, I will admit. And I don't mean that in an embarrassing way.
Number 2, the English language obsession. Yes, I'm not an idiot. I know that English is the language of America. But at the same time, don't you think it's a problem that almost 80% of America, of our country, literally only speaks English?
Isn't English one of the most spoken languages on the planet, though? I know Spanish is up there, as is Mandarin for that matter. Hindi as well. I would argue if you needed a second language, I would favour Spanish because of your country's close ties to South America. I'd say close ties, we both know what I really mean. Although, if you want to develop closer bonds to that of China, Mandarin would be a great option. Perhaps John Cena can give you lessons. In my country, English is obviously our first language. But we do teach second languages in school. When I was in secondary school, there were 3. German was taught by some schools, although I thought it was redundant because we don't speak loser. French, but I don't speak surrender, although I do speak it fluently. Not because I surrender though, just because I got bored. And Spanish, which made perfect sense, except Europe is, well, there's a lot of countries with many different languages. So the reality of learning any one of these languages seems pointless really, unless one country was ruling all the others. So perhaps German. I'm making this a lot about my experiences with my area of the world. I do apologise for that. To stay on point, I see no issue in Americans only speaking one language, because you don't need to have multiple languages in your repertoire. You really don't.
Because if you don't think that's a problem, then you've never left America, because I can tell you right now that it is very much a problem.
It's a problem if you leave America and go to a country where you don't speak their language, but thankfully there are devices that exist now on one's phones, translators, that will help us in countries where we don't speak the language. To learn multiple different languages to visit other nations seems redundant, unless you intend to stay or visit on a regular basis. This point doesn't really hold as much weight as you think it might.
At the bare minimum, we should be taught on a much higher level at least 1 or 2 other languages, and we're just simply not, and then we get upset with tourists when they don't speak perfect English when they come here.
Lol, we English don't speak perfect English. Who cares if someone does or doesn't? That's just you getting triggered because differences. That's very reactionary and very American, to be honest. I do think your education should perhaps consider including one additional language, yes, if it doesn't already, in many different regions. I'm sure it does in some places, but that is a state-level issue. I don't think it should be federally mandated.
And it's just out of control because we as Americans, when we go to other countries, what language do we expect them to speak? Always English. Always.
Yes, we English felt the same when we conquered the world, but then we decided to give it back to them because we got bored of being in charge. Now, you made 2 points in your video: American flags and iconography with American flags on, and language. Both are kind of weak. Your argumentation was pointless, really. You didn't really present a coherent argument beyond the education system being flawed, and being proud of your nationality is also flawed. But then when one scrutinizes, it doesn't stack up really, because there's nothing wrong with being American, and there's nothing wrong with speaking a language that dominates the planet, or one of the main languages that does so. On to video number 2, and this one's very different.
And you know why I know that? Because we're just gonna say no. Like, how are they gonna actually force us to get up and go to war? I understand it was like that in like the 1940s. What else is there to do in 1940 besides shoot people? We have things to do nowadays.
The context you're going to require for this concerns the draft. Now, in the United Kingdom, we got rid of this mandatory service. We don't really need it anymore. Many will say, older especially, that perhaps it's not the worst idea in the world to have a mandated form of national service, because people now are either lazier than the last generation, that were lazier than the last generation, that were lazier than the last generation, or they have gotten too soft. The claims that wartime generally breeds stronger people and peacetime breeds whatever the mess we currently live in.
We have twerk, be bisexual, eat hot chip, lie, and we're also like really mentally ill. I have like 6 of these.
Of the 4 things he listed, I only understood 2 of them. You can work out which 2. Congratulations. For the sake of it, all four become redundant when you are drafted. They really do. The last part is an interesting one because it often devolves into this thing of, pissing contest, I must now one-up you. I've had this on Twitter. It often devolves down to this though as a way of saying either I'm more of something than I really am, so I have to get out of it. It's an excuse really. Or you have genuinely no desire to do what you are legally obligated to do. By the way, there are many ways you can serve if you are compelled to do so.
What makes you think I'm qualified to have a gun? Like, within 600 feet of anybody, including myself.
I feel like the last part of what I just said can be rinsed and repeated here. Being drafted doesn't necessarily mean you hold a pew-pew in your hand. But I like this idea that you think that you are compromised enough that you can't be trusted to hold one. In the context of why you would be drafted in the first place, I don't think you understand the gravity of what would cause such an event to happen, and the desire to survive that will come from that. Now granted, there's a chance you might be the type to roll over and show your belly and hope that you are simply used as a concubine. The reality is a lot harsher. Even from what humanity has gathered through recorded history, it has never truly managed to convey just how harrowing life was to how life now is, and what would cause such harrowing life to return, to get you to be drafted anyway.
And finally, like, guns are like so tacky.
You're right, swords are better. Although I will admit I do quite like a morning star.
Like, can you imagine just like pulling up with a gun? Like, that is so fucking embarrassing.
I can think of a lot of things that would be more embarrassing than rocking up in a war with a gun, or pulling out one when you're clearly not trained to use it, although basic training is provided. I'll start with a white flag. That's quite embarrassing. How about a white feather? What about a pair of assless chaps?
Like, what is this, the Revolutionary fucking War? No. Like, let's just chat. Let's just talk.
So I, for the most part, believe that discourse is vitally important to achieving any level of peace. However, this is not a sentiment shared by many different nations because of their cultural norms and practices, ideologies, faith, belief system as a whole, regime in charge, that will prefer a more violent route. But I do like the idea of just talking. But this is one massive distraction and deflection from you just simply wanting to say, I don't want to serve. That's all you had to say, really.
There's no need for all the no. No.
While I've stated I would prefer discourse to be the explored option in the majority of cases, I believe I've adequately conveyed that this is not always going to be the case, or achievable. So I do think there are some times where war is inevitable. Notice why I said inevitable as opposed to achievable, probable, or likely, or desirable. There's a reason. Can anyone work it out? If you can, tell me in the comments. I'm intrigued to see what you believe my interpretation of this is.
It's not gonna happen, don't worry.
Well, at least you're optimistic, eh? In all seriousness though, when push comes to shove and you are drafted, your mindset will have to change in accordance with your legal obligation to serve your country. In the United Kingdom, we just get drafted. We don't have to sign up to be drafted. If it happens, you get drafted. Simple as that. But we, the United Kingdom, don't generally want to go to war or go looking for a war. We merely back up the bigger nation that we're too busy sucking off.